Welcome to the Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zack Cherry, and with me as always is...
I'm a disaster in bed. I don't know why. Eddie of Edward is Truth.
And today we're talking about opera, or Dario Argento opera, released December 1987. No, like Dario. It's not Dario Argento's. It's just Dario Argento opera. Did you ever notice that? Like, it's weird because normally the name at the top is like, if it was just like that, it makes it seem like he's starring in it, and it's the same thing with the poster for Suspiria.
Right. No, it's like it's just kind of leading with the draw. Just, Dario Argento.
Yeah.
Really?
Then
it goes opera.
But it doesn't belong to him. It's just like Dario Argento and opera.
If you're looking for him, you can find him over here. That's what the poster's intimating.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the fourth film we've covered by Argento, I believe, because we did
Tenebrae, Suspiria, and Deep Red.
Red, yeah, Profondo Rosso. Most recently. And we were meaning to do this back in November, but, we kind of had to take a little bit of a break because, of course, I was filming my movie out in Connecticut when that was going down. And we tried to make it happen. And there's several things got postponed. We were able to do Seed of Chucky when I got back, but this episode and... not the next one, but one at some point this month, depending on how we release them. I don't know. Because I am going back to Connecticut for now, January. So Happy New Year, by the way, everybody. And Happy New Year, Eddie. Although, currently, it's December 30th when we're recording this. But, this is interesting because we're just, stockpiling episodes at the moment, recording 4 before I even leave, just so we can get these all out. So this is the first one, and I think that it's a very interesting movie to cover for our first podcast episode of 2025.
Why?
I don't know. It's just it's a peculiar entry in. I mean, like every Argento movie's a peculiar entry in Argento's film catalog, but it's just a peculiar movie. And there's actually watching this, and I guess more recently, just with the advent of Scream 6. I noticed a lot of parallels between these two movies, which I think are really funny, and not in a good way, like bad parallels. Well, you know how I feel about that. But this movie,
we know you're going to bring them up.
This is the thing. Most of Argento's films are not really narratively driven. It's just if you're going to a movie that is an Argento movie and looking for logic or a cohesive storyline, or cohesive or coherent, you're not gonna get that. I think that probably Tenebrae and Deep Red are the most logical of his movies. Suspiria, that is already kind of going into very abstract supernatural territory. This is for all intents and purposes a murder mystery, but very little emphasis on murder mystery and more so just sort of it's got the style of all of the Argento movies, and I would argue it's probably the most interesting to look at. I think that in terms of the cinematography, this is his best film.
I mean, it's also Argento loves to lean into a mood, whether that's depicted through color, shadow, what have you. And music, of course, 100%, and this movie's no exception. But one thing that I noticed, and we'll talk about this when we discuss the means by which you can watch it if you haven't already. Major spoilers coming up, fit kids. But I did see snippets of ads for the release that just dropped last July. and already the colors looked even more enhanced than what I streamed. And so I'm looking forward to just seeing like how this is developed through restoration after restoration, because it doesn't strike me in my memory even as like a really colorful movie, which is something I often think about when I think of Argento or the use of colors. But with this one, I tended to associate it with muddy tones, and then all of a sudden on these new releases, the blues are so blue. And I started noticing, I don't know, and red also. I just was like, oh, there's red and blue in this, and I just always just thought brown and black, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like it's what's so interesting about like every Argento film is that it has a very unique color palette and visual style, like just in terms of like the way that people dress. Like I think that like that's very apparent in Tenebrae, which is a very like pastel, like muted pastel oriented, like just like clothing, like everything is kind of washed out and really bright and white, so that when you do have like the blood splashing on the wall, it like really pops out. And then Suspiria is like all like technicolor, like everything is just so vibrant and like all over the rainbow. And then something like Deep Red is more like, it's like moodier, like it's there's like reds obviously, but like lots of like blacks, like extreme blacks, and like golds and like bronzes and stuff. So yeah, one thing though, like that I noticed with this movie is that like probably like a word that I would use to describe it is just like opulence, because everything just seems very very classy, very very expensive, and it's just like it even though like a lot of the things are dated, like you kind of like just see like the technology that's implemented here, like in her apartment, like the stereo system and all that. So it's just like, you know, it's just like, it's sort of like a meshing of like old and new, but like just like very like rich tastes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very much of its time. Like, I mean, you are not going to be confused as to what particular period or era that this movie falls into when you see that 6-piece stereo stacked on top of itself with the little digital red and green volume levels and whatever else they would track back in the day, like rising and falling. Like, yeah, it's quite charming. Takes me back.
Is this the first time you've seen opera?
Oh, no. I've seen this, I think, probably about 15, 20 years ago. For the first time. I think I only saw it the once, and it made an impression. I did like it. I just remember it wasn't, I had more fun this time around watching. I forgot how much fun it was because I think I associated it with some of the key images that oftentimes are just kind of like what the poster art depicts from the movie, which I thought was incredibly effective, but also, you know, kind of brutal. But there's a lot of fun to be had upon returning to this movie. How many times have you seen it?
Oh my! I mean, I watched it like twice just to prepare for this, but I didn't actually watch it because I actually have the like the new release, the Severin one that came out, which I was like really like. I'm just gonna hold it up to the camera. Like, look at that artwork. Like, it's just insane with like the raven, with the eyeball in its beak there. But I also, so this came out, I think you said July. I also like got this one that came out like a couple years ago because it was like a German release, and this is just the traditional poster. And it's like a big boxy type situation here, but that was the only way that you could get it on 4K. Previous to that, so I'm just like, okay, I'll get that. And it's the same release. It's just I think there might be like English speaking commentaries because all the features on the German one were in German, but the movie you had I think 4 versions of the movie, or just like because there's the U.S. cut and the international cut. The U.S. cut is called Terror at the Opera. Which I don't watch the US versions of that because they're all like trimmed down and like all the good stuff is missing. But they have like the 4K and the Blu-ray, and then I think there's a CD in there as well. But the new one, there was 2 audio commentary, actually 3 audio commentary tracks by just like Argento historians, I guess you would call them. So I listened to both of those rather than just watch the movie again because I've seen it so many times. And the third one actually it's a commentary with the actress, the main actress, Christina
Marcellak.
Yeah. But it's in Italian, and there was like English subtitles. I'm just like, I can't for an entire movie. Yeah. But like more on her later. Okay. But yeah, it was. I'm still kind of exploring the special features on that one to see more. But it's a movie that I've seen since probably early 2000s, like mid 2000s, whenever I first like got into Argento films. And this was actually one that was more readily available because remember all the Anchor Bay releases. They had Suspiria and Opera, and I believe Deep Red were the ones that were just like you could easily find anywhere. They were just all over the place in any like physical media retailer. So I had seen that one really early, and then like the movies like Tenebrae and Phenomena and Inferno were like harder to find, and then like in some cases like Four Flies on Grey Velvet just did not exist at all. Like you had to like find like really expensive imports that just looked like shit. So yeah, I'd always seen this one, and it's never been my favorite. Like again, like just my taste. Like I always like movies for the script. And it's just like this is not one that really like as it goes along, like there's nothing to get excited about, but there is like visuals that you can be excited about, and I think that on further viewings of this movie, I've just like really appreciated like I said, the cinematography, and like the thing is like the camera never stops moving. Did you notice that?
No, actually. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie never stops moving. I never felt like it stagnated, so that makes sense to me. But wow. Okay.
Yeah, there's always something interesting to look at in this, and I think this is like the most expensive movie that he made. It certainly feels like it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on screen for sure.
Do you wanna get to the housekeeping and then do a premise?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, awesome. Well, I just wanted to thank all of the Patreon supporters of mine and the podcast. If you are new to the Cherry Picker, you can check us out on Patreon or my Patreon at patreon.com/ZackCherry, ZackCherry. And if you want to support us and help the podcast grow, head over there. And if you're supporting us, you will get early access to all episodes. And if you're supporting us at a higher tier, such as the Freddy Krueger tier, you will get to see the Cherry Picker After Dark, which is the bonus episode we release once a month. But having said that, I do want to shout out some of my top tier supporters. So for the Michael Myers tiers, thank you to Kyle Beard, Maxime Rivest, Ali Hamouche, Shane Allingham, Tim McKay, Stephanie Starbright, Horror Slut 95, Bruce the Genetic Jackhammer Rando, Josh Carr, Michael Boswell, and then the Ghost Faces, Eric Champney, Sam Levy, Daniel Saturn, Baby Ghoul, Garrison Nichols, and Craig Lynn. Thank you so much to all you guys and everyone who's supporting on Patreon, making this spin around, helping me pay my rent as well. If you're new to the podcast and you want to see more hours of bonus footage, like we got 30 Cherry Picker After Dark episodes, and like god, like just hours and hours. If for whatever reason, like the two of us interest you, and you want to hear us banter, best way to check that out. Where we talk about lots of things like beyond horror movies as well. So You were mentioning other than the Severin release, how else can people see opera right now?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Zach. Actually, there was a story. I was doing some digging as I usually do, and I saw that the physical media releases included the 5 disc that you have. The thing is, there was some controversy around it because apparently initially there was a problem with like the color grading or whatever, or the color timing.
Yeah.
And then they had to issue like an additional disc. And I was just curious, with your release, did you have to get mailed an additional disc, or did you get it late enough?
No, it's because yeah, the way that it worked, like with Severin, they do this, and they did it with like Four Flies as well. Like they release a limited number of copies, and then you have to pre-order it in that window, and then like by the time the pre-order is done, like I don't even think it's available. That's not to say that it won't be released later on or by a different distributor, because that's what they do. That's how they make money. Which is it's like the what's his name? Was it like Steve Rubel, the Studio 54? Yeah. We're gonna have like a huge lineup outside, and there's only gonna be like 5 people in the club. But yeah, it delivered, and it got here very fast, and then within like 2 weeks, they issued a thing on their social media just saying like, this is what's up, and if you've purchased one, you've already been mailed the disc. And the disc came pretty quickly as well. And the thing is, I didn't watch it right away when I got it, just because I'd already like more recently got the German one, and I had watched that, so I wasn't in a rush.
Oh, I see.
But like comparatively, like this to the German one, like this, the color is already like so much more vibrant with that.
That's
so
what it looked like.
So I didn't actually see what it looked like with the off color timing. I have the disc, because I didn't throw it out. But,
right.
And it was just the one disc.
Yeah, well then, because afterwards people started having issues apparently with the aspect ratio, because this film is available in multiple aspect ratios, and people were, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was available in 185 1, 178 1, 235 1. Apparently it was filmed in 239 1. So I have no idea. But the issues apparently seem to prompt Severin to schedule a new 4-disc 4K Blu-ray combo that's releasing actually January 28th of 2025. Okay. So if this is all scaring you, you guys who are listening, and you want to get something that's a little bit more bona fide, and like, I only want to get it when the bugs are out, I understand. Wait until January 28th. And if you can't, but you want something else, there's also a region-free 3-disc 2K Scorpion Deluxe Collector's Edition from 2019 that's also available in 2 aspect ratios of 235 1 and 178 1. And then if that all sounds too involved,
very technical here.
Yeah, but then just in case people, because I was fascinated.
Well, that's just a Blu-ray too. You might want to mention that if you're going to go through all the rigmarole.
Well, there you go. Stream opera. If I was just going to say, if all of this is too much for you, you can stream it on subscription-based platforms like AMC Plus and Shudder, basically same thing now. Yeah. Or for individual rental on Prime or Apple TV Plus, which is where I streamed it, I had no issues. The only one was, I think, I got a hold of, it's an hour and 47 minutes runtime. I don't know whether that's the theatrical release or the director's cut, or if there's even a difference, because sometimes it's a matter of frames.
Well, it's not that it would be.
They called it. I'm just saying director's cut because that's what they advertised it as on that box set. I watched a few reviews and they kept calling it the director's cut, but international cut we'll say from here on out.
Yeah, so like 107 minutes for the international cut. So it's that. Okay. That's an hour 47.
Yeah, and I watched one that was an hour 47. So it's the same.
So I think that would be
probably a matter of frames.
Yeah, then. Like I said, I've never seen the Terror at the Opera cut, so I don't know how much is actually cut from that. But it just seems like every time we do this, and you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go watch that movie," and then you stream it on some bullshit like Tubi or Redbox.
It actually advertised on Tubi, but it's not on Tubi right now. So don't look
Okay.
for it on Tubi if you're watching it.
But that, yeah, but that's like, but it turns out to be like the chopped up version. Like imagine like looking for Phenomena and finding like Creepers or something like that.
Oh dear.
You know,
I like Phenomena.
Well, we'll have to cover that sometime. But having said that, do you have a premise?
Yes.
Since
Yes, I do.
That took like 5 minutes to get through.
Okay, it did not. All right. When a daring new production of Verdi's Macbeth loses its prima donna to an automobile accident, a singer named Betty takes her place, shooting this young replacement to instant stardom and a relentless pursuit by a psychopath with a connection to her past, who forces Betty to witness his brutal murders of any contact she's made, all because of the opera. I didn't put in Dario Argento because I don't know how to make that work. So
without the apostrophe s. Betty. Imagine if Betty Davis was playing Betty.
Oh my God! I'm too young for the part.
What do you make of Betty, by the way? Because I just like I find her to be such a like unlikable, I guess, like, final girl in this situation. Like she's just like I don't feel a lot of sympathy for her. I find her to be very frustrating, because she just sort of like she sort of sleepwalks through the movie and just like lets this shit happen to her. And I think like none of that is more evident than like every time there's a murder, which she is basically like made to be the captive audience to each one. And then after, you know, she's like set free and she just sort of like wanders around. She doesn't like go to the police. She's just sort of like, oh woe is me. Like what, like what do I do? And like not communicating with people, not telling them like what's going on, like probably making this very difficult for the police investigation, which I mean might be like to her benefit considering what we find out at the end.
Right.
But
right.
It's just it's one of those movies that you just like it again. You have to like check the logic because she's so frustrating.
Well, I think the dub helps her immensely because it makes her a little bit more ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I'm less infuriated and more kind of dazzled by just the whispery voice with which she often speaks. And also, I mean, I do want to give her flowers for coming through in the clutch. Like by the end, she's a self-possessed, defensive, like alert person who's basically as kind of like suspicious as she should have been the entire movie. So she does get there. The thing is, like, I no longer care about her by the time we reach that point. She's really just kind of like you're watching, I don't know, like a bland person wander through and the movie happens to them. She's that character.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean she's not entertaining to me. Like I love her point of view the way I love Heatherface's point of view in Texas Chainsaw, The Next Generation, just because she's so kind of like, I feel like she's not even moving through the movie. She's kind of orbiting it, just kind of observing, like, I don't know, these things are just so strange. I don't know how I feel about sex. It's not really my thing. I'm not my mother, though. And everyone thinks I'm a slut, but I'm not. But I'll try. You know, I mean, she just, I don't know what her convictions
now I'm just
are.
seeing her as like Jennifer Tilly with that voice.
Yeah, right. I don't know. We're very close. But see, if Jennifer Tilly were playing this role, it's not the actress's fault. I think she did a pretty damn good job. She's actually responsible for one of my favorite shots in the entire movie, this actress.
Oh, which one?
Do you want me to tell you now?
Yeah.
It's after she's dilated her eyes in her apartment, and she just lays there on the bed, and she's just kind of got this wide-eyed blinking going on, like just trying to see things. It's probably the most real moment that we've experienced of her the entire time, because I'm like, oh yeah, if I dilated my eyes, I'd probably sit there testing him, trying to go, can I focus yet? Can I focus yet? And it's just, I laughed out loud. I watched it in like 1 a.m. last night, and I just went, like when she was just sitting there, just making her eyes big. You know, I don't know. I'm an easy target for shit like that.
Yeah,
Physical comedy,
no, that's
man.
fair. She does a really good job. The actress lip syncing to the actual like opera music. Like it's making me think of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls and just how convincing they were when they would sing the lyrics to the songs, like overcut. Yeah. Just like it works. Christina, I'm just not even gonna bother pronouncing the name. I'm gonna mess it up. But like, she did not get along with Argento, and like vice versa. And I mean, that's kind of a typical thing. It's just like Argento did not get along with a lot of his actors. Like usually like the main actors, like he clashed with Anthony Franciosa on Tenebrae. But there's like a lot of people who've like repeatedly come back and worked in his movies. Like there's certain faces that you'll see like turn up again and again. So clearly, you know, they're it's not like he didn't get along with everyone. But she's kind of like I said, she did the commentary on this one, and I know that there's interviews. So I think that she's really come out of the woodwork, because she's kind of disappeared for a while, and she's like started to speak about the experience. She was in there was a Shudder documentary about Argento called Panico, I think it was. I think that might have been the first time she showed up and was just talking about him, and she had like nothing but nice things to say. So like, you know, who knows what the stories were that got blown out of proportion. But I can see Argento just being like a very particular kind of director, that if you're working with a certain person, and you know, she was very young back then as compared to now, so you know, maybe they clashed in certain ways, because she just wasn't seeing things eye to eye with him. But it's always interesting to just hear like little backstories about these, because Daria Nicolodi is also in this, and this is the 5th time she's, like technically the 6th time she's been in movies with him, because like the first one was Deep Red, and she co-wrote Suspiria with him. And I guess there's a lot of tension with that, because there was always like this argument about who really did write the story of Suspiria, because Suspiria was like her brainchild, or just like based on her experiences sort of thing, and she's credited as a writer, but apparently she didn't know that she was going to be credited. It was like one of those things where it wasn't until like the premiere and she saw her name on there. So there was like, you know, they had a very interesting relationship, because you know, they have daughters together, and they I don't know if they were ever married, but they were partners. And then after it ended, they still worked together. And I think that this set particularly was a very difficult experience for her to work with him, because it's just like his like then girlfriend was also in the movie, and there was just like all these things, you know, almost like what the story of like John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, and you know how they, you know, continued working together after their relationship and all that. But she like, and this was like all on the commentary, apparently she was like afraid that he was trying to kill her, and he was like trying to kill her like with the movie sort of thing, like, oh my God. Yeah, like so her death scene in this movie is like probably the highlight. It's like the most spectacular moment. Like if you think of like a kill from opera, it is Mira is the character's name. And also interesting thing, this is the first movie that she's done with him where in the English dub it's actually her voice, because every other time it's she's dubbed by like a ADR voice actor. One time it was like Teresa Russell in Tenebrae. So this is the first time you actually hear her actual voice, which it's like, I don't know why they couldn't use her before, because it's like she sounds like she speaks English very clearly and has a very like interesting voice. But yeah, anyway, I guess the her death scene in particular, like the way that they did that with like, I guess the squib or whatever, was dangersome or something, but she was very nervous about that.
I can understand. Also, I mean, I was so relieved because I had forgotten that she was in this one. So when she came on screen, first of all, I was just kind of like, love the bangs, girl. You're given, she's got one of those incredibly strong faces. So I was almost kind of getting like Angelica Houston in The Witches kind of vibe, like strong face with like bangs. And, like, woman in the world who can handle herself kind of vibes. Like I was just kind of like, she's saying, I'm your agent, and I'm like, yes you are. And she just boosts everything. Like she just knows how to kind of like lend to the mood whenever she's in, like when she finally makes her way to Betty's apartment, and the two of them are just kind of like whispering to each other and just kind of sneaking around, skulking around the apartment, trying to figure out who the killer is, where the killer is, what could it possibly be. And she goes right for the knife, which is in a cupboard for some reason, but I'm like, okay, Italy, I don't know. And then but just everything about her just kind of like feeds like the tension of the moment. It's not even like a moment that I'm terribly like afraid for, because I do tend to kind of like smile as I watch movies like this, but she's a welcome component to all of that, because like she just makes it more watchable. She just feels kind of like immediately lovable, and immediately someone who I have no problem believing is on the side of our quote unquote heroine.
Well, she's also like one of the most logical people in the movie, because there's a scene where Betty calls her and is just like, I need your advice. There's a killer after me. What should I do? I'm like, call the police, idiot.
Yeah. And don't just rely on one person, like call the whole team. Like make sure you got, some people, got your back. But no, that's another thing that makes her strange. I mean, also it's worth mentioning, to get back to Betty, just in terms of like the character, she's loosely based, this whole thing, the framework of it seems loosely based on the Phantom of the Opera, and Christine Daae, the Betty, originator, I guess, is also like, a character that's often talked about in a I don't even know if problematic is the right word, because it can be misconstrued. I feel like problematic can mean either to the material, like it hasn't been structured properly, so there's not much to it, it doesn't serve the plot, so it needs to be fixed, or problematic in recent years meaning like, I guess what's the word I'm looking for, like pushing forth tired tropes and prejudices and things like that, things that aren't mindfully put together, with a kind of social consciousness that I think audiences crave for the most part these days. Maybe she's both Betty in this particular instance. But I mean, she's also just, I don't often get to laugh at the Christine Daaes that I see in adaptations of Phantom of the Opera, because I've seen quite a few. So the fact that I get entertained by her, the fact that she does kind of get to have these little moments where I get her perspective on her own life and what she's going through, and just kind of, I don't know. I don't know. I find it a little endearing, and I think it actually acts as a hook, again, to kind of like draw me along and, make this movie, its course run smoothly, as opposed to me sitting there going like, God, will she just die? I don't ever really feel that way, that level of animosity toward her.
So it's interesting that this is sort of like, I guess, like based on Phantom of the Opera, because it's like not really. It's like maybe just more so like very loosely. But Argento did go on to adapt Phantom of the Opera. I believe,
which I still haven't seen.
Neither have I. Like this was like maybe 10 years later. And his daughter Aja plays Christina in that, and then Julian Sands is the Phantom.
Who's not disfigured either. He doesn't like having disfigured phantoms in his opera, apparently.
I mean, I've heard that it, like, at the time when I was first watching all the Argento movies, like that was said to be his worst movie. And I think that like since then that's been reevaluated. Not that Phantom of the Opera was reevaluated, but just that a lot of like worse movies came out after that. Like and I still haven't seen them, like the Dracula 3D that he did years and years ago. But yeah, I mean, I if it came down to like which of Argento's Phantom of the Operas you were gonna watch, it would definitely be this one.
I mean, I already have, and I will watch this one again.
Yeah.
And I haven't. I've seen clips from the other one, and there's like weird imagery. Like there's one point where he's kind of gazing into fire, and out of the fire flies a mousetrap, like a giant mousetrap though, that's caught all of these people underneath, and they're naked and writhing. And I was just like. And it's all done like in this beautiful tungsten light that's framing to look like romantic and not dark and gothic, you know. So I was just kind of like, well, that's a direction to go. That looks less horror movie and more just kind of like erotic melodrama, which apparently he does sexually assault his Christine in that version, the version in the 90s.
Argento certainly liked to put his daughters into provocative and I mean it's interesting. I mean, just like he just treated them like they were actors, you know, and just sort of like there's this separation of, you know, anything. Interesting. You'll love this. Argento is a Virgo.
Oh, no, don't put that on me. No, I'll take Sofia Coppola and Godfather Part 3 over Aja Argento in Phantom of the Opera probably any day, because at least all she does is, you know, kind of talk about fucking. Like, that's
well,
okay.
Apparently, like, she's now, like, directs and produces, and she puts herself into like even more, like, I guess, heinous things than her father ever did. So, you know, she's just done it to herself. So, you know,
okay,
I don't.
Well, good for
whether
her.
Whether that was nature or nurture, you know, we'll never know.
I mean, I really, we shouldn't talk about that Phantom until we dive in. I would watch it for this pod too, because I feel like there would be a great conversation
at a certain point. And I started to, the plan was to just sort of like rewatch all of his library, and then like all the ones that I hadn't seen yet. And it never happened. There's like, you know, he has like maybe like 20 films altogether, but you know, I know which ones are my favorites, and I'm sure they're not gonna drop down from having seen any of his newer things. But I'd say opera's like high up there for me, like if I were to rank his movies.
Yeah. In reference to you talked about like the general look of the film, and one of the shots that I thought captured what you were talking about perfectly, especially in juxtaposition, because we're getting two very, very different elements in essentially not the same frame but the same shot, where it's after everything goes on with the rehearsal and the hustle and the bustle, and then Mara gets hit by the car.
Mara Jacoba.
She's out.
Yeah.
Yes. So in has to walk young Betty, and everybody is in. I love that it's preceded with kind of like the busiest backstage I've ever seen in the history of my life. People are speaking with open throats, full voice, having nervous breakdowns, tripping over each other, getting angry at each other, and chastising one another before they go on stage. I'm just kind of like, is this what opera's really like? I've been on stage before. I've never been in an opera. I have a feeling it's not like this. That there's thousands of people in the wings of that theater. Anyway, but it's the shot, I think, when we establish the house itself, where all the audience sits, and it looks incredible. It's beatific. I can't wait to see it, you know, fully restored. But the version even I saw, I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, they're really capturing, like, we were in that rehearsal and we never really kind of got to take in the space. And now we're seeing all the audience seated in anticipation during the overture, and it looks so lovely. And then the camera just kind of swivels around and takes in the dark, stark landscape of what looks like the wreckage of a plane crash.
Yeah. Well, so they're doing Macbeth.
Yes.
But yeah, it's interesting. Like I'd love to see it, And then like later on, we see like the whole stage has been like reconfigured, and there's like this like huge staircase that goes up to like the far back, and there's like pillars with like dancers in sheets who are nude. My favorite shot, I don't even like there. It's hard to like pick a favorite, but one that I really like, and this is one because the movie's not constantly moving, but like it always feels like every time there is a moving shot, it's doing something very interesting. But this one is still, and it's when Betty comes back to the opera house, and this is after Mira and the other detective have been killed in her apartment. And the director Mark is there, and they're just like sort of it's like a low angle from behind the stage, and we're just sort of like looking out at the auditorium in front of them, and they're kind of like the depth of field of them sort of standing there and like walking up to the edge of the stage while they're plotting how they're going to uncover the murderer. And there's just something about that shot that just like is really special. But you mentioned Mara Jakova. So do you know so that character, do you know the story of like who was actually supposed to play her?
No. Who?
So Vanessa Redgrave was contracted to play this character, and it was initially going to be a much larger role in the movie because like Mara Jakova is sort of like a red herring. And I guess how the movie turned out, it's not a very effective red herring because we never really see her. We just, whenever we see her, it's just like she's kind of obscured. She's almost like the like that sitcom trope of like you know, Maris or Wilson on Home Improvement, where you're just sort of like behind the fence. You just sort of like kind of see her there. But like initially that was supposed to be a full-fledged role, and Vanessa Redgrave you know, flew out to Italy, and you know, once she got off the plane, she went to Argento and demanded more money to be in the film, and he was just like, no. So she walked, and then they had to like you know, completely recalibrate everything about the script and this character. So when you're seeing her at the beginning, because like it's sort of like this POV shot as like we're tracking away, but it's like it would sort of be the back of her head, because it's like she's like that, like the way that it's filmed would suggest that she's sort of like looking at him and walking backwards as she walks out the door. But yeah, they obviously did away with her character as quickly as possible, or just, you know, the only time we see her is like, you know, like when she's throwing the shit at the TV, or like in whatever situation she's in. But I think it would have been interesting if that was more like, had she actually done the movie, because I think that for me, you know, one thing that I would have appreciated if this did lean more into the murder mystery aspect of it, and there were suspects, because that's something this movie is really lacking, are suspects. Like the first time I saw it, I kind of guessed who the killer would be from like the moment that he showed up on screen, and then it was just like, you know, by the end it's just like, of course it was you. I'm just and actually, I should talk about the Scream 6 correlations, because now I'm just thinking of
here we go.
Dermot Mulroney just being like, of course it's me. No, so, and this is where like you really have to suspend disbelief and accept a lot of ridiculousness to just buy this movie, because at the end of the movie, Betty believes that she has or that Alan Santini, detective or Inspector Alan Santini, who's the killer, has shot himself, and is like, his body has burned up in this fire in the opera house. And then we like skip to like the Swiss Alps or whatever. They're like in The Sound of Music in this
100%.
Which more on that later. But director Mark is like watching the news, and this thing comes on, and it's just like, and this is not like it's just happened. Like this is like, this news report is like more bizarre updates about this opera house fiasco from several months ago or however long it's been. But it just turns out that the body of the killer, who they thought was the body, was actually a wooden dummy.
Right.
So it's like in like the span of however long this was, that like coroners weren't able to distinguish that this piece of wood
For weeks.
burned up, was actually not the corpse of a human. But it just like it made me think of, I mean, not that this is maybe a credit to Scream 6 being a little bit more believable, but just like him switching out the body of what's her face, because remember he had it's like, we just got a fresh cadaver and
Sure.
but how they like easily were tricked by that. So that was one correlation that I noticed, but also just the fact that it is sort of like the killer is the detective, but also that you have this character who's kind of like plagued by the past, where her mother was like a serial killer for all intents and purposes. Like, I don't know if the mother actually did any of the murdering, but she was obviously in cahoot. Like, they had an arrangement, like this weird.
She was like the Charles Manson of her own little family going on.
Yeah. But in any event, it was just like whatever this like dark twisted history was, like Betty, is afraid that like that's part of her identity as well. So it's just giving me, Sam and Billy Loomis sort of thing. Like, it's just like, it's in you, and it's always like kind of like give in to the temptation, because that's what the killer wants in this movie. He's just sort of like, he wants Betty to sort of like take the role of what her mother was and do this. And then, you have in Scream 6, the killers are just like, take your rightful place, like put on the mask and yada yada. So like very very like loosely kind of connected there, but it was just, there was some correlations that especially just in terms of like logic and stuff like that, and just the ridiculousness of it that made me connect the two.
I'm glad that you went into that, because it was a question that I had for you, which was, why does Alan kill? I feel like Glenn and Cedar Chucky, why does he kill? But I just because or maybe not even why does he kill, but I mean, I guess we're supposed to, I assume we're supposed to presume that he is like a manic crazy person, so sometimes crazy people just do crazy things. And because I was watching him in the opening while he was killing the usher who followed him into like box 5. That's what it is in Phantom of the Opera. And he's just like, you're not supposed to be here. And he ends up like killing him kind of accidentally, but then he knocks over the light, and the light kind of ruins, or could have potentially ruined, her opening night. And I just kind of felt like he's not being very surreptitious about his comings and goings. He didn't get caught. Nobody saw him do it because he's in a box and everybody's eyes were on the stage. They just saw a light fall and they're all wondering, what's going on? We stopped the show. And then she got the chance to pick it up and save the show again. But he didn't do that so she could save the show. That ended up just happening. So it just made me wonder, like, is he just like controlled sometimes when he's like under the guise of this policeman, and then when he's just kind of got the black gloves on, the Max XXX scene black gloves, murder gloves on, is he just kind of like untethered and unpredictable, or maybe the most predictable person in the world, and he's just going to lash out at anything and not think about the consequences, and he's just really lucky that he didn't get caught until the end? I mean, how do you perceive him as a character, if at all?
I mean, I perceive him like, okay, so Urbano Barberini, the actor who plays him, extremely attractive, good-looking guy.
Very, yeah.
He was in Demons. He's the main character in that movie. He just doesn't have a beard, which he has here. And it's like, I think the difference of like 2 years between those movies. So it's funny how much more like mature it makes him look here. But Yeah, I don't really, I don't think about it too much. I'm just sort of more like,
Yeah.
appreciating the eye candy. But eye candy, how ironic. But it's more, when it comes to him, I'm more so just like perplexed by the backstory, because it's like he doesn't seem to be that much different in age to Betty, and it's like she's this little girl back then. So it's like it begs the question, like, how old was he like during this whatever this is, like between him and the mother, which like then kind of makes you think about it more, just like is like the mother, like she's like the abuser here, sort of situation, because like if this was a child when it all started. So it's like it's almost like the less you think about it, the better. Like it just makes it a little bit easier to.
Well, because I did wonder, like they do disfigure him, like when the birds attack him and everything like that, with their fiendish plot at the end to reveal the identity of the man who attacked the ravens. And they remember and they go after him. They're like, "That's our man." I'm like, okay, there's no flaws in this plan whatsoever. It's lovely and poetic and good for the ravens, because actually that did wound me a little bit. Like it looked, I don't know if you know,
all these people getting killed,
but it looked like
left, right, and center. But the bird, oh my god!
Of course justice for the because the people are not really getting killed. The ravens, it looked real sometimes. Like they looked like they were really like on the floor writhing.
Like,
and I was like, oh
there was like something like well over 100. And there was obviously like a bird wrangler and all that, but I guess by the end of production there were actually half the birds were missing, so we don't know if like they flew off or whatever, but it was like, I guess like chalk it up to the Macbeth curse or whatever, like just like all the terrible things like happening to this movie. But I know that they used puppetry for some of the birds in the thing. But I mean, in terms of like the character and I guess like his psychology, really, I think it's like, it's no different than, like any of the ghost face killers or whatever. He's putting on this persona, while he's kind of meeting her. There's obviously like some sort of attraction that he had, because I mean, like he shows up. The first time we really see him is when he goes to her door, her dressing room door, and he's sort of like, he's giving her flowers, right?
Yeah. A flower. He holds up a single flower, which is even more romantic.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
I would be taken by that.
And I love that she's just like, "Oh, are you a fan? Would you like an autograph?" I'm like, oh my god, she clicked into her stardom right off the bat. It's the same night. She just took her costume off. She's like brushing the sweat off, going like, "You're a fan. I'll sign this for you. You need a selfie?" But go on, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just getting flashes of Jennifer Tilly as or Betty Davis as Betty. Doing it for the fans.
Yes, right. Lots of them remember me.
But no, it just like, they're, clearly like that's why it just felt so obvious, because it's like, okay, there's some sort of there's some sort of like thing that's like attracting him to her, and we see him lingering, like, because it's like the shot starts with, it's like a POV coming up to the door, so right away that kind of, I'm just like, whoever's on the other side of the door, they're the killer. And then it was him, and I'm like, okay, I've got my eye on you. And then as the scene closes, because there's more people like coming in and out of the room, and she goes to close the door, and you can kind of see him like in the background. Yeah. He's like, like leering over, like still watching her. And I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, like, because that's the thing. It's Argento doesn't do subtlety. No. So if there wouldn't be a red herring that's just so obviously the killer that it wouldn't be the killer. Like if someone is being extremely suspicious in an Argento movie, they are the killer. Like that's it's just how it works. because he doesn't know any other way to be subtle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't even like Santini really only has like a few scenes other than that, because like there's where after the Ravens have been attacked and he's in there and they're like reporting it, and I don't even remember what was being said because I'm just like looking at him like drooling, and then there's the scene after where he's outside of her apartment, but it's just like he doesn't make much of an impression other than like physically. So I don't really have much of a read on him until like the end, where it's sort of like once the birds kind of like find him and peck out his eye, and then he starts going all like manic and crazy and trying to shoot them, and then like ending up shooting one of the nude sheet dancers in the background, which is just like, I feel like that's totally like Mark and Betty's fault. Like I blame them for that. We
Well, let's incapacitate our dancers, so in case there's an emergency, they have no means.
Well,
of
let's not even tell.
Themselves.
Like we have this elaborate plan that's kind of potentially going to endanger everyone in this theater, both both patrons and people working there and performing.
Right.
So we're just gonna do this, not tell anyone, and just like, we'll deal with the consequences later. But yeah, like he's revealed and goes after her, and I don't even know what it's hard to make out what he's saying. Like the sound isn't all that great. Like it's just. When I first saw this, I still wasn't really sure what the backstory was. It's like, I had to look it up and to actually get a better understanding of what this relationship was that he had with the mother and all that. So yeah, it's really hard to grasp the character, like both before and after the reveal. It's not as well put together as like what you would see in a Scream movie.
I don't need like even a ghost face reveal where he like then monologues about like, this is why I did it, this is who I really am, and this is why you need to pay, and also this is my angle. Like this is my whole what's the word I'm looking for? Just like postmodern angle about like take on it. But the only thing that I kind of wished, because I did notice like, oh, now the birds are attacking him, now he's disfigured, now we've got even more, like we're leaping more into kind of like phantom territory. Like now he even started screaming. At one point he did scream like, I'm a monster. And I was just kind of like, okay, so now you're a disfigured monster, like a universal, classic black and white horror villain.
I'm getting Buster from Arrested Development.
Oh, that would have been great
after getting
too.
his hand chomped off by a loose seal.
Right. But what I would have appreciated even more is if they probably would have leaned even harder into it, because you brought up something, again, it's rooted in logic, and I think sometimes when we try to explain away things that are illogical by applying logic to them, they only become more ridiculous, but then there's more fun to be had, and that's sometimes what camp truly is. And I think it would have only helped if you brought up the age or the non-age discrepancy between the two of them. What if like he had been the entire time, like his hair was like a wig, and then while he has Betty tied up, like up in what were they up like in the flies or the backstage area of the opera house, and he's like kind of doing his Scooby-Doo reveal, like, here, this is who I am, and this is why I did it, and this is what you mean to me, as much as he can. If he could have like talked about, you wonder why I look so young, and if he could have just like pulled his wig off and revealed that he had like hundreds and hundreds of facelifts and maybe like had all these scars on his skull or something like that from like pulling the skin back to make him look younger and younger or something. And because then I don't know, because then it's just ridiculous, but it also does kind of explain it in a weird way, like in a fairy tale kind of way, And then also I get my monster. I get the realization like, oh, you're not hideous now. you made yourself into this monster. Like this has been accumulating over years and years and years, and make it almost feel like a kind of like grim fairy tale. Do not do this example. And a more interesting villain. It would have made him a little bit more for my taste.
No, that's fair. I think it would have just like,
but the most
it would have like sucked out all the sex appeal though, because like in that last scene, like when he shows up there and he's got like the leather jacket and like obviously like the one eye, like he's not even wearing an eye patch, he's just got it kind of like there's still like the wound there, and she's just sort of like, okay, we can be together now or whatever, and walks away, and he's just sort of like, really? Okay. Like, this is what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking like, yeah, go get it. You know, like he's a sadistic, psychopathic serial killer. But I mean, like, he's into you.
And he's into you. I mean, get a glass eye. He's taken care of. Done.
Yeah.
Solved.
Yeah.
But no, for me, I dig the Beauty and the Beast angle a little bit more. Like, I mean, did you ever see not the OG Murnau Nosferatu, but the remake that they did? I think it was in the 70s, 80s with Klaus Kinski.
Yeah, I have it. I don't think I've seen it though.
Okay, there's an incredibly hot scene where the female protagonist is laying in her bed. She's got this very sheer, that I remember, nightgown on. It's like fabric. It's like sheer fabric just stretched over her boobs. And he pulls a sheet down to reveal her basically naked body, but not quite naked. And then he just kind of like leans into her, the Nosferatu, Count Vlad, and he just kind of leans into her and just like kind of like silently just kind of like bites her neck. She relents, and she's just laying there. She's not even fighting the whole time. And you just hear him sucking her blood, and it's like ASMR, which I'm also susceptible to. But and his hand kind of like drifts. I don't even think he touches her, but his hand is just kind of drifting over her body. And I remember watching it going like, this is hot. Like, like if I were her, I'd probably be like, well, let's see where this goes. So if he were like monstrous, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere we get this wonderful kind of like, I didn't know it was a plan at first. Because really with Argento, anything goes. Like the characters can say or do anything and I will buy it. So when Betty at the very end finally kind of says, no, I am like my mother. Yeah, you killed him. Good. Let's go run away together. And I'm just going to like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this now. And then when she finally turns on him, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess we're doing this now. So good for her. With the rocks and with the beating and everything like that.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to see her do that with someone who looked as monstrous as he was, because I think I might have bought into it even more that, oh, now she's far gone. Are we saying it's a bad seed? It is, on her mother. But then this defiance, no, I am not your mother. I'd love to see a sequel where she's just in therapy going like, I said I'm not my mother. I think I'm a little bit my mother, and then we'll talk about why.
Well, I mean,
examples
he
of
didn't
why
he didn't
in her
die
life.
at the end, like he was apprehended. So
right,
one of the few, maybe only giallo.
Betty,
Argentos
they never found his body.
Yeah.
He was only apprehended, and now he's got apprehended. And now he's broken loose. There's no way of knowing where he is. That Betty Davis is playing her therapist. You must run for different hills, Betty. Higher hills.
We're podcasters, investigative journalists.
And she's just like, I'll take my payment now.
I've waited for this for 40 years. Well, what is it? What are we coming at? 40 years? The 40th anniversary will be 2027. So.
Oh my God! Yes. Okay. I want my opera 2027.
If Argento has one more in him, just get a sequel to opera ready. Just bring back Betty. Bring back Alan Santini, and let's see that movie. Of course, she'll have a daughter now.
It'll be a new trilogy. The second one can just be called Opera Kills. The last one can just be Opera Fini.
Opera Fin.
And then, and it'll just, the tagline will just read, Macbeth brings bad luck. But I also, there was something in terms of like, there was another POV shot. There was quite a few of them in this movie, actually, now that I think about it. But it made me, again, laugh out loud, and I didn't remember it, and I think it followed... It happened while the opening night performance was happening, and she's on stage having birds thrown at her. And it's before the light has fallen, and you just kind of see this POV like wandering around in the corridors and the backstage area, and the lobby steps maybe at some point. But anyway, all over the opera house and everything. But the thing is, the angle that it's being taken from looks a little short to me. It doesn't look like kind of man-sized or Alan-sized.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was to throw us off, or it was just because it was easier to hold the camera at your midsection. So I was almost getting like Puppet Master or Child's Play notes from those POV shots. I thought I was watching Chucky run around the opera house, and I thought that was darling.
Yeah.
It also made me chuckle.
and it makes you think of like Halloween as well, because in the in the opening scene where you're seeing Michael's POV, they're basically holding the camera at eye level. So like, even though this is supposed to be a child, it's like we're hovering high above the actual like kitchen sink and the drawer. So it's like, this is adult height that we're seeing, and not actually this little 6-year-old child that is revealed after. But so there's like, because we see this in the movie with like what you're explaining of like this POV, but it also kind of like segues into this flashback of, which I guess is like POVs during the old times. And I'm wondering now, is that Betty, or is that Alan's POV? Because they're usually accompanied with this shot of this like pulsating brain. And the thing is that there's like, every time that happens, it's not like Alan that's on screen or whatever, it's like Betty. And like there's one moment in particular where it does it. Actually, I think it happens twice, where the screen actually pulsates as it's happening. And there was one, I think she had like almost like this like visceral reaction, like she was having a migraine or something. So it's just making me think, like, is this her brain that we're seeing? And because like obviously a lot of this is like to do with memory and her trying to like go back to what was happening. And I mean, we do see in the POV at like one point, like he comes to this like naked woman in a bed, and like obviously there's like the knife going over it, and that, but it's just like, are we still, it might not necessarily be Betty that's doing that, but like in the POV, she could still be watching it. So I was curious, now that you bring it up, that like it seems like it's a child's height. Like, was the flashbacks then, because the way it's kind of tied together later on when we sort of get more of like Betty seeing her mother and all that, if that was maybe Betty the whole time.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised to hear if Dario Argento spoke about this film and about the multiple perspectives and about the dreamscapes, if it was all just an effort to disorient us. Yeah. That's one thing that I think Argento has in his mind completely, in addition to just whatever motivates him, his own impetus to share these images and these stories with us, these tales rather, because I feel like they're stories too involved. Tale is just kind of like, once upon a time there was a girl and she fell down a well and then she got out, and that's an Argento movie. But she had nightmares while she was in the well, and we make a movie about the nightmares. With this one, and then we find out who pushed her, down the well. But I wouldn't be surprised if he said like the whole thing is to disorient us, and also to just kind of like give almost maybe a shared consciousness between Betty and Alan, in terms of like them both suffering at the hands of like her mother. Like her mother is the reason like she is even kind of like in her consciousness, not even in her subconsciousness, but in her, or unconsciousness, but in her consciousness, like she's constantly living with this like ghost of, you know, like, oh, being called, you know, told like, you like sex because opera singers like sex, your mother liked sex, so you're gonna like sex. And she's like, no, actually I don't, I'm really bad at it, and I don't I've tried, of course I've tried, but, and I'm Italian, I should have a real tight way in there, but I don't. So apparently it's just something, a label that's been put on me because of my mother's existence. And then I remember at one point, wasn't there a little girl in like this attic space or wherever like these women were being tortured and killed, and then the black hooded figure kind of ducked in and ducked out of her purview? Wasn't
there's the neighbor.
No, I know that. Yeah. But at one point, like, I feel like in one of those dream sequences where the mother's just kind of, because there's all of these shots of the mother just like looking down the barrel of the camera, just kind of staring almost like kind of acceptingly, like, yes, this is what I'm doing, my child.
Yeah.
You like it?
See, I might have needed a little bit more like, you know, mommy dearest of just sort of like, you know, like almost like the Maureen Prescott of Scream 3.
Oh, God. Betty, make them know what fear tastes like!
Those were the Pamela Voorhees of Freddy vs. Jason. But just like, you know, like if there's like a sequence of just like, Betty, like...
I was so pretty.
Look what they did to me. Just to like give a little bit more context, just like, and just make the mother a little bit more frightening.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just like it just goes back to like sort of like the coherency of the narrative and just like all these things, because it's just like, yeah, I mean, you just gotta kind of take it at face value. But there's clearly like there's a theme of abuse, like child abuse, because the like, to speak of the neighbor, the girl who's crawling around these events. I mean, this building is like spectacular. Like her apartment is amazing, but like I guess like the idea is that it's an old building, so it's just like nobody's gonna hear you scream. The walls are so thick, but there's this like ventilation system where apparently like you have access to every apartment, which is kind of the one downside of this place, because this girl, like the neighbor girl, just kind of like crawls around and like her vent goes right into Betty's bedroom. But that turns out how Betty escapes when the killer's in her apartment. And they end up like crawling into the girl's apartment, and the mother's there, and like this woman is just like a nasty piece of work, and like she's just like, get out of my apartment, or whatever, and then she starts like beating this child. And we see her earlier too, because she's looking at the peephole and she's saying goodnight to one of her, you know, male suitors or whatever, and they're having this argument, her and Betty. Or was it Mark? I can't remember. But so it's sort of like there's clearly this thing that's like, you know, because she's not comfortable by it, but she's not like staying to protect this child. She's just like, okay, yeah, I'll leave. But she, you know, she's clearly broken up about it. So I think that was like done in an effort to just sort of like, I guess, like move the pieces to where they needed to be for her to like start unlocking this memory.
I just thought it was hilarious that Betty didn't obviously not know her neighbors. So she was already kind of a star in her own mind. And I also thought, like, when she was running around the apartment with Daria and Nickelodeon, the two of them were like, what are we going to do? We can't trust the man downstairs, but we can't trust that the man in the apartment. Well, how do we know which is which? And I'm like, you know, if you were nicer to your neighbors, you could just go across the hall and just stay there.
Well, Betty, like, she strikes me as like kind of like an antisocial personality.
Maybe.
Like I can't see her. Like she doesn't really have like people skills, you know?
No.
Yeah.
No, she's used to being the star. She's actually perfectly poised to be just like someone who's going to be adored and everything like that. I mean, even the way she talks to, is it Stefano or Stefano? The stage manager.
So I don't know. I'll say Stefano. I just like know him as like William McNamara, who is he was in Copycat. Did you ever see that with Sigourney Weaver?
Love that movie.
So he is the heavy of that movie, and he's clearly an American actor, but in this movie, for some reason, he's been dubbed by a British actor. So it's like he's just like full on British in this movie, because I guess they didn't want him to be American. I don't know what the situation there was, but like apparently like he didn't know that, like, because it's just like you know, he did the movie, and then when it came out, it's just like, that's not my voice. I'm not British. But you know, I didn't realize that like the first time I saw it. I'm just like, oh, this British guy. So what was the question?
No, it wasn't even a question. It was just a comment about Betty and her inarticulate nature around people, and the way she conducts herself with Stefano. Because like I think he's the one who I first really kind of get a peer into like exactly how. I mean, she's obviously nervous when she finds out she's going to go on, and she's saying things like, "I'm too young for the part, and Macbeth brings bad luck," and everything like that. And I'm like, well, didn't you sign on for this? Didn't you sign on to be an understudy? Like, what the hell? Yeah. But you know, creatives can be that way. Like everything I wanted now, I'll serve to me on a silver platter. I'm not ready, and but I'll go on and I'll nail it. But then like afterwards, like the way she just kind of like breaks things down with him, and the fact that like he even says to her, I think like right after they don't have a success, you know, he says, "Now that you're famous, it seems as though things are a little different between us." So obviously they've had some kind of romantic rendezvous. Yeah, it's been one show. It's the same night. Now that you're famous, things are different. And it's like, I don't think they're really that different. I think you're putting that on her, Stefano, because I'm getting the impression that Betty has always been Betty. I think she's like, I think he just doesn't. I think he feels inadequate, and he thinks that he's the reason she couldn't get off that particular evening, because he's a handsome guy too. Like I can imagine a lot of people getting off successfully with him. And if they didn't, he'd probably take it on and think, "What's wrong with me?" But also just like because this is actually a good way to lead into this also, to probably the most significant, memorable thing, not beyond memorable, it's unforgettable about this movie, which is the imagery of her getting bound, Betty getting bound and everything like that by, we don't know Alan yet, but by Alan. And then having her mouth taped up, and then having the row of needles on the two little slivers of tape put underneath her eyes. That was the most significant thing I took away from the movie, my initial viewing. Just because I'd never seen that before. I'd seen people have their eyes like pried open, like Clockwork Orange style. Yeah. And I think I saw like a makeshift version of that where somebody tried it with toothpicks. And that was hideous. Yeah. But this was the first time I saw something like that, where it was like your own will is going to either damage you psychologically from witnessing it, or damage you physically from your eyelids closing. Even though logistically, again, doesn't really make sense, because you can blink safely and be fine.
I don't think that, like, I think there's enough coverage that it's not going to shut up your eyelid. Yeah. But like we do see, like, because like she's blinking because you know you tried holding your eyes open for a very long time, and there's like a little bit of blood on some of the needles. Right. I think that it's just like, that's one thing that I can kind of, again, suspend disbelief over, because it's just a really cool imagery, and it's one of the things that, like, when you think of opera, I mean, it's on the cover of the poster, just like the eyes with the needles under them. So it just sort of, it's one of those things that you just kind of accept. You're just like, it's about style over substance, I guess. Of just go with it. And it's interesting, and it happens twice, I believe, throughout the movie. So it's sort of like the killer's, you know, MO in a way to do this. So again, sorry, what was the question?
No, just a comment. You're just keeping the conversation going.
I have a question. Actually, more of a question.
No, because that's another thing. It's just like the it makes me laugh that like once she's freed, I think it's the first time that they finish. I was already laughing because also the rock music, I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And again, set against like all of this incredible like opera, you'd probably expect that there'd just be like harder opera, but no, they're going full like rock, and I'm like, okay, so this is like, I mean, it's 1987. They're trying to like lean into like maybe opera feels a little archaic, or maybe Dario Argento was worried about it feeling a little archaic to younger audiences and wanted them to think the needles under the eyes, this is what you came for, is the impression I get. You know, it's like the dream warriors of this movie.
I think that, so this was like an era of Argento's where he was like experimenting with music in that way. So both this and Phenomena have like this intrusive heavy metal soundtrack, and I mean, I think that it's fine here. I think that it works with everything, just like this juxtaposition, and it's also not used inappropriately. Like where it's used, it's just like, okay, this is a particularly, you know, intense violent scene, so it works here. But in Phenomena, and we can talk more about that when we cover that movie, but there's just you know, he just kind of went hog wild with things, and there's like Iron Maiden tracks, and they're used at like the most inappropriate times. Like there'll be like a really kind of like tense scene of like you know, like a girl like trying to like hide or like move through this place, or like Jennifer Connelly's like trying to escape a situation. And it's just like this soundtrack kicks in, and it's just like, this is the worst fucking music that you could play for this thing. And it's just like, it's, you know, sometimes like that's the thing. It's just like Argento's instincts weren't always the best, because I think that, you know, there's a lot of, you know, like the score for this movie, like there's several composers that are actually credited throughout this, and there's pieces of music that are just like, you know, that I find work really well with what they are, that it almost seems like he could have done something, but like, you know, it could have been more memorable just with like the kind of music that's used. I mean, not to say that it's not memorable with the heavy metal, but there's like a dissonance that sort of like, it doesn't like sit as well as it would if it was just like a composed piece of music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. At the same time, I wouldn't change it certainly in this movie, because I enjoy the chuckle it gives me, because it's almost, I don't know, it's because everything at that point feels kind of implausible, like right down to, I wouldn't change like the needles under the eyes, because again, it's a very striking image. It stayed with me. It's the most memorable thing about the movie for me, and yet at the same time, logistically, not like the most effective way to torture someone, but in theory, like, and if you just, that's where I think like this movie kind of like finds its footing, is just kind of like, just in theory, just ride the idea, ride the mood, ride the, you know, whatever, and laughs are welcome. It doesn't feel like a movie that's like taking itself too seriously. It feels like Dario wants you to laugh if you feel like laughing, and I appreciate that as well. I think the thing is, I already warmed up my laughter with the sequence, because I knew to expect it, and it's you know, not horrifying. I'm just kind of like, ooh, horror, yay. Yeah. And maybe the rock music picked me up. But then when I loved that in the aftermath, we're left to see her, untying herself after he kind of slices, you know, the ropes, like, okay, now free yourself. And she's starting to, and she reaches up, and she doesn't reach for the needles under her eyes first. She untapes her mouth. Something about that made me laugh so hard, because I was like, this is nothing on your mouth. Like, get the fucking needles off my eyes. So again, like, it's not quite human instinct we're dealing with. And I don't know if that was just what she wanted to do, or if she was directed to do it in that order. But it just made me laugh that Betty's like, fuck, I haven't been able to speak for the last, like, 7 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it might have just been more of a thing, because it's just like, you can just rip the tape off, where I feel like, you know, Argento might have wanted to make more of a meal out of like peeling the needles off to sort of like save that for the end. I mean, you know, I never really considered it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm also unclear. 'Cause I didn't go back and watch it again, so I don't know if you remember. I'm unclear what exactly she told Mark when she's alone with him after that first kill. I remember she sat there and she disclosed. Did she disclose everything, or did she just tell him like a few details?
I think she just said a few details.
Okay,
Like,
like there's a death.
Yeah, because I mean the thing is, it's like he's sort of like if Alan's not the killer, it's Mark. So
Right,
you know, there's
100%.
yeah, it's one of those things where I think that she's still unsure of who to trust. Like it seems like the only person that she really trusts enough, at least for her advice, is Mira.
Yeah.
But she's, you know, obviously very cautious around people, so she's just sort of, you know, keeping them at arm's length, or just like, you know, like using, like just being very guarded, or just like kind of using them where she feels that she can use them, and gauging, you know, whether they're a threat or not. So it's just like, and again, like a lot of the dialogue here, I'm not really paying that much attention to it.
No, I liked Julia quite a bit too. Like even from the moment she was introduced, she was one of the only other women in the opening sequence where like we're kind of introduced to the voice of Mara, and then we see kind of like this mousy note taker whose name I still don't remember. I guess she was one of Mark's assistants. And then we see this creative, you know, kind of enter the frame. I don't even remember if she was wearing a turban or what, but I was just kind of like, oh, you're the costumer.
Or
and then
the wardrobe mistress is
the wardrobe mistress,
color,
yes.
yeah.
And I really enjoyed the fact that, again, like in playing with like this sense of logic, not quite logic, that Julia, in her interaction with Alan, she kind of gets the upper hand until he throws an iron at her back, which incapacitates her to the point where she is laying on the floor. And I'm like, did he immobilize her? Is she no longer able to walk?
She has this visible pain. She's like, you know, like one of those things. She's a very emphatic actor. Like her performances, like she's also in Demons 2. She plays Sally, the girl whose birthday it is. She's just a horrible bitch. But she's just sort of like, you know, one of the highlights of the movie. Because like whenever I think of opera, I think of her, and just sort of like just her nonsense throughout. That, you know, like that sequence, like her whole death scene and all that, like everything leading up to it, again, like just like incredible cinematography. I love how the camera is just sort of like moving through this like wardrobe studio, and like, you know, kind of like being pulled back over like the scissors and the yarn and all that, and like it's just it's all done like really well, and like the context of the scene is like pointless. Like there's this bracelet that's attached to the wardrobe, which never really has any relevance. Like, I mean, I guess you can kind of put together that this belongs to him or the mother or something. Like there's some sort of correlation, but like the etchings on it aren't like clear enough, but like they found it, and it never really goes anywhere because he just like claims it back. But it like it's this big thing, and it's like she ends up swallowing it like after she's killed, and then he has to like cut open her throat to get it out. Like there's this whole production made out of getting this bracelet that never comes back into play again. Like it's this whole thing, but just like this sequence is just so ridiculous, because like here we have Betty, who once again is being incapacitated easily, and then just like put in this case, and you have Julia just like coming out there and just like oblivious to everything, and a great shot where it's just this wide, and you see him kind of like run up to her until it kind of like punches in, but there's like this struggle that's going on between them that is like very unclear until like you have the iron, because he like throws it at her, like you said first thing, she falls over and is like I'm getting like Peter Griffin when he like took that spill on the sidewalk, just like
for 12 minutes.
Yeah. But then she's like, take it. Oh, just go away, leave me alone. Just like, here, you can have it. And then he turns his back on her. It's just like, was he just gonna walk away and leave her? Because it seemed that way, and then she was sort of like, you could see the wheels turning in her head. She's like, wait a second, like her eyes get all shifty, and she's like, I'm gonna double cross him, and she picks up the iron and goes and like bashes him on the head with it.
Right.
And she sort of has this Sidney Prescott moment where it's just like she was ready to leave and like, no, I want to see who the killer is, but she actually unmasks him, and it's such a great moment because this is where like the camp really comes in, of just sort of like, she sees him, we don't see him, and Betty doesn't see anything because she's, you know, over there with the pins on her eyes, and he's like down below this table, and Julie is just like, oh my God, Betty, you won't believe who it is. It's, and then like the hands come up. Yeah. And just her death, just her performance of that is just so over the top. It's wonderful. The kills in this movie in particular. Yeah. Like even Stefano's with like the blade going up, and you in the
like in his
throat,
like uvula or something. Yeah. So really effective.
And getting like the hands stabbed and all that.
The thing that I particularly find maybe the most effective about Julia's kill, and it might be the most effective thing in terms of like the whole movie as far as like effective horror filmmaking, is just the sound effect of the shears cutting through, speculating, like thinking, is it her sternum? Is it just the vocal cords? Is it just the skin? Like, what is that noise? It's so specific. It's undeniably human anatomy. But I love just kind of sitting there speculating what exactly is happening. I don't like it. It's so gratifying as a horror fan. And then it's all kind of undercut again by this illogical POV shot of Betty's eyes, which have the needles there, and everything else is blurry. So like now you're telling me that the entire time that Betty's eyes are like welling with tears and blood as she's trying to keep her eyes open with these needles. She can't see anyway. So the whole point of him torturing her so she can witness and be traumatized by these killings that he's doing, if that's what he's trying to do, he's obviously trying to agitate her. It's ineffective because like, I can't see. I wish you could just scream, I can't see, fucker. My eyes are welled up with tears. Take this shit off. I promise you, I will leave my eyes open. And so there's this wonderful balance of humor and the torture, which I don't know, I can totally get on board with. Also love the fact that like she also dilates her eyes right before she invites a perfect stranger into her home while she knows she's being pursued by a killer who has already incapacitated her twice and killed people in front of her twice. Now I can trust these people, though. I can trust this voice on the phone. You're in that vein. I think you're right. I think she's not really like the brightest person, and not even the most survival oriented. I'm kind of like, well, now you're asking for it.
I mean, I hate using eye drops. Like, it's always like it's just like getting, like, aiming properly and getting it in there, because I find like most of the time I'm doing it, I'm probably like completely missing it. But was it like wasn't it on Friends or something? Like, was it Rachel who like couldn't do the eye drops or whatever? But yeah, they literally had to pin her down and like bite the eye drops into her eyes, like as they were holding her down. Yeah, but it's one of those, like, you know, I've put eye drops in, and it's like maybe a second, and then you're fine. You're not like, unless this is like back in the 80s, there was like a different formula that isopropyl or hydrogen peroxide in your eyes. Yeah, don't do it. But it's just like, it's one of those conceits where you just have to kind of like, you just accept that it's like, it's goofy, but it's like serving the purpose of what it needs to do, and it's, you know, part of the style, because it's another like POV thing where now like the image is blurry and we're not seeing exactly who it is. So it all kind of like, in terms of logic, it's just like that's been put on the back burner, but the style is up front there. Like, you know, there's like you were saying with the pins in front of the eyes, just like seeing that point of view. It's just like it's not really so much of just like what it actually will mean or look like. It's just to why the movie works, because this is just like a visual feast.
Yeah. Also, I can't decide. Maybe you can help me determine if this is wise of her or if it's just chalk one more, stupid decision up for poor Betty. After she escapes with, the little girl helps her through the vent, and then she leaves that apartment. She decides to go back to the opera house, to the theater, to just kind of like, get some rest. Yeah. And I laughed out loud again because I was like, the place where he knows every nook and cranny and where he probably has shit like hooked up for you and everything like that. We're still not going to like the police station. We're still not including more people in this to kind of like rally like some troops behind you. But at the same time, I thought, well, if he can get me at home, where can't he get me? I may as well go into the belly of the beast. Yeah. Maybe he'll have the home field advantage, but at least I won't be surprised by him showing up there. So maybe that's the only place, ironically, where I can get rest. I don't know. Where do you fall?
Yeah, I just think that she's an idiot. Because like, that's the thing. It's just like once she seems to like feel some sort of comfort and safety in that dressing room, because like after the whole stunt with the ravens, and they have that moment, like it was Roman, like because she goes back to the dressing room, and this is like there's pandemonium. Nobody has apprehended the guy, as like he still has his gun. He's still like, all willy-nilly with it, all about the opera house, and she just sort of like comes into her dressing room and is just like almost like not so much a sigh of relief, but just sort of like, okay, time out. It's like that was the vibe of it. And then Mark comes in, and that's where they're just like, oh, it was, Santini all along. And they're like, yeah. And it's like they're like just about to start processing that, and then he sort of like pops out of nowhere. And it's just like, of course, because like you're just letting your guard down. You're not like it's just like one bad decision after the other. And but it's been, consistent with her this entire time of just somebody who's not really mindful. I mean, like, she may as well be, I don't know what Betty's actual age is. That's not to say that like younger people are stupid. I think that like, common sense does exist, but like she clearly is someone that needs to like reach out to her mentors, like, asking Mira for her advice on like how she should handle the situation. Yeah. So it just seems like this is someone who's like very naive, to a point where it's just like her survival instincts are just like have not developed. But the thing is, like, she seems like she's a grown adult. Like the actress must have been like, in her 20s when this was made. So I don't know. It's hard to say, but I just think she's a moron.
I do too. Yeah. Who turns around? Like, I did wonder, like, there was some random shot. It's seemingly random. There were a lot of things that were seemingly random in, like, say, maybe easily the front half of this movie that did, I guess, quote unquote, pay off, or at least made more sense to me as we turned the corner around the climax of this movie. Yeah. One of them was, I think it was right after her opening night performance, there was just like this shot of the gun in her hand. Yeah. And I was like, what a random, it was just kind of like, here's stuff happening. Now a gun in her hand.
What is this?
And now we go back to the movie. Yeah, right. Well, that was another thing that was interesting too, but I'll get to that in a second. So I saw the gun, and then I realized, like, at the end when he hands her the gun, when she's all tied up and she's got the blindfold on, he puts the gun in her hand. I was just kind of like, oh, the gun. Okay, so it was a significant moment of triumph for her professionally, and now it's going to be a significant moment of triumph for her and the means of her survival. Okay, I see you, movie. There was another one where she was alone in her apartment. I think it was after Mark, the director, tells her he always jerks off before he directs the scene, and they're just talking about sex, and then they get in the apartment. I was sure they were going to hook it up, and then they didn't. But he leaves, and she's sitting there, and I think she's weeping. And then you just hear this little voice going, "Don't cry, Betty. Don't cry." And I'm like, what the fuck was that? Is that Billy? Is this Black Christmas? Are we getting like multiple? Is that like the Phantom who's like going like, "Don't cry, Betty," but and she doesn't hear it? Or was she telling herself in a little girl voice? I was so like perplexed. I was like, what is happening? And then later on, when the vent opened up and the little girl helped her out, I was like, oh, she was eavesdropping. She was watching her. Interesting. Now I know what that means. So I mean, I like that Dario doesn't just kind of feed me everything. It's not exactly nuanced, but it is filmmaking. You know, it is just kind of like, remember that thing that fucked you up that you didn't know what I was doing? See, I'm doing something.
Well, I
there.
mean,
So I appreciated that.
I mean, you can look at that, but like in terms of like narrative, it just seems like for every solid catch, there's a pathetic fumble somewhere. So
Yeah,
it's like that's the thing. I just like I could just have to be honest about Argento as a storyteller. Just like sometimes it's just like I mean. Tenebrae, I mean, it is a little convoluted, but it's just like by the end, it's just like, okay, that was very clever. It just like it comes together. Same with Deep Red.
Yeah.
So I know that he can write a coherent script that has like twists and turns, but it's just like I just know not to like just to take everything with a grain of salt, because it's like, again, it's like the bracelet thing. It's like none of that. You can kind of look at that on the same token. It's just like. It's this thing that still doesn't make any sense by the time the scene is finished, and it never is addressed again. But then you have these things like the voice or whatever, and not really knowing what it is until the girl shows up. So it's like there are some things that are explained, and then there's other things that are just like completely thrown away.
That's
so
true.
you just gotta kind of take it where you can.
The bracelet, the whole point of the bracelet was just to hear it being pulled out of her jugular or whatever.
Yeah.
That was that it served its purpose. Now it will be abandoned. Same thing with the little girl. She's not significant at the end of the movie. But I did on a personal note, like I was a little proud of myself for about 5 seconds per reveal of like when they would play an opera song, aria, whatever you want to call them, and I'd just be kind of like, oh, that's a cabaletta from Macbeth. I know that moment. That's like when she's, reading the letter and determining like what she's going to do. She's murder happy. I know, the only reason I know is because Terrence McNally's masterclass, it's featured in that. Same thing with at some point Betty's playing Madame Butterfly, the aria that she sings like at the end, and I know that because it's in 2 movies. It's in Fatal Attraction and Victor Victoria, and then later on La Traviata. I know that because Pretty Woman. That's where Richard Gere takes Julia Roberts to see La Traviata, and I was like, oh, I know that song. So I just thought, for a second I was proud of myself, and then I thought, oh no, I'm probably just a basic bitch who, like, I mean, somebody who's unfamiliar with musicals would probably be like, I know that song that everybody knows. Like, what's a song from a musical that you're familiar with, Zach? Not that you're a dumbass, but like, musicals aren't your thing.
Les Resistance from South Park. Blame Canada. Like what?
Okay,
it is
Blame
a musical.
Canada.
It is a musical. Don't you?
It is 100%. It's a very well made musical too. But yeah, so Blame Canada. That's something that everybody knows. So somebody could be like, Blame Canada. I know that. So I feel like I had very kind of mom energy around like, I know opera, but the only reason I know it is because I watch movies and plays. So, and at the end they were doing some aria from Macbeth where I think it was after Lady Macbeth like goes mad and outdamped Spot and all of that. And she's got Macbeth like singing in her ear and everything like that. And I was like, oh, I've never heard this. I've never seen it in a movie or in a play. So I'm an uncultured fuck. There you go. So thank you, Dario Argento, for making me almost feel cultured by knowing some opera. Apart from that, I did appreciate the imagery of the fly on the... it looked like fishing line at the very end.
Well, what was he doing? He was like filming a fly or something? Because he's a movie director, but it's just like, is this the movie that you're making? And are they fucking now? Like, what's the situation with them? Like,
I don't know. I mean, they're in each other's lives. I wouldn't put it past her.
Is he? Sure, is he like, I'm making a movie in the Swiss Alps, and you're the star now?
I think whatever it is, there's a bond.
Well, she doesn't seem to be all that broken up after Mark is killed at the end, because it's sort of just like that happens. And I mean, obviously she's putting on airs to like, make Santini trust her, but as soon as he's apprehended, she just like kind of turns her attention to the lizard in the grass.
Yeah. Oh my God. She says like, I like, what was it? I like wind. I love butterflies. I love insects. I love the clouds. And then the little lizard picks its head up and everything. And I like that image, that creature. Like they could have chose any Disney creature, you know, under the sun, like a little bunny or a little whatever. But I love that it was a lizard because a lizard kind of suggests almost not danger, but it's a reptile. Some people might go ew, but she embraces it. So I'm like, you're really truly embracing nature.
Well, he has like, you know, in a few of his movies, there's been like some like lizard abuse and stuff, because like in Deep Red, remember the little girl put the pin in it, and I think that there's also something in Inferno to that effect. But he's making amends. You're reciting this monologue that she had. It makes me think, is this something that like one of his daughters like did for like a class project, or just like this is their like a poetry thing, because it's so innocent and childlike, but also like ridiculous that this like that again, which is why like I asked like what is her age, because you know you have movies like Suspiria where you know like Susie and all of them were supposed to be much younger, and that's why like the doorknobs are, you know, higher on the door, because it was supposed to give this feel of like them being children. So, you know, I feel like Argento does try to do a thing with Disorientation of like making older people seem younger, which I mean, it's not far off when you look at like Scream, where everyone is like 26 playing, you know, 17.
Right. Actors in their 30s.
Yeah.
But
I like the wind. I like, because that's just
well, also because like you see the fly on the leash, and what strikes me about it, because I've seen flies used as symbols before, and it's usually about being incapacitated, being under a glass, being, you know, unallowed to be free. And I just thought like, oh, you're never free. And so he's gonna fall. I immediately thought like, okay, so there's a fly tethered to something. He's obviously going to show up, and there's going to be a little epilogue kill scene, or at least a scare, where he's like, here I am in the Alps, Alan. Yeah. And then, but then I like that the final kind of like non-human creature that we see is the lizard, you know, making friends with our leading lady. And it's like Argento wanted us to think that he was making one kind of film with the fly. And then at the end with the lizard, it's like, no, but
I think that he's just putting all his like little flourishes in. Because I mean, like there was flies in Phenomena. And there was, you know, 4 flies on Gray Velvet. So I think that it's just like, you know, little signatures of his. It's not like, you know.
But we also had, we'd laid the groundwork with ravens being incapacitated before this too. They were either being in cages, they were being in a theater, or they were being abused and killed. And then finally they got their day in the sun at the climax too. So
there's, I don't have much more to say, but there was one, which actually is one of my favorite lines from the movie, which is spoken by, I don't think her name is ever stated, but it's listed on IMDb as Marion, and she is the director's girlfriend. Like she's Mark's, I guess, girlfriend. Like that's the thing. It's like there's a scene where they're together. Her. Yeah, they're together, like in bed, and she's reading the reviews or whatever. Like she's kind of a non-character, but she makes an impression. And I kind of wish that she was in it more, because like she might have been a fun red herring. But she has a line where they're walking down the hall, and it's in the international trailer, and I just think it's so funny because it's like grammatically it's one of those lines that's just like it's a lot. But she says to Mark, like, all this turns you on. You're a sadist. Yeah. Everyone I know who knows you says the same thing. So it kind of everyone I know who knows you says this, like, rather than just being like everyone says this, like all the people we know. And it's kind of, again, to like just make a Friends reference, it's like they don't know that we know that they know that we know. But she's fabulous. She like shows up in like that scene like right before, and she's wearing like, I don't know if it's a tracksuit or something, but she's got sunglasses on, and she just lights up a cigarette, and she's just looking around like judging all these people. And it's like, because she doesn't even like her hair looks different, like it's longer than it was in the scene before. So I don't know if she's wearing a wig
Right.
or had extensions put in or something from the night before. But
Or just took a long time in between shots. Maybe,
yeah, maybe. But it's just like it lingers on her like she's like of significance, and she never really turns out to be anything more important than that. So I think that maybe that's just there was more written for like all these, like there was for Mara Jakova, to set up more red herrings in the movie, and they just don't show up.
Even her assistant, like the gay guy who, and I just assume he's gay because of the side eye he's giving like the entire time. When he delivers the undesignated, I mean, do we really need to guess what it is? It's piss. When they like she sent her piss as a fragrance to Betty, like as an opening night gift, like, oh, congratulations on your success. I pissed in this. But it is fun. But but even he's kind of like planted, I think, feels like a red herring because he's always giving like that, like, suspicious kind of like, there's more to me. I have a backstory. You'll find out soon. And then we never do. He never comes back.
He was also in Demons.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was like, because there's like
I gotta rewatch that.
Yeah, Alan Santini actor, then him were like the two guys, like the two preppy guys that, shacked up with like the two girls in the theater.
Fun.
Yeah, we should do that movie at some point soon. And maybe the sequel as well. Well, there's like the church and the sect, but I think like the Demons is the best one. But yeah, it's a thing of just like all these people kind of like cross-pollinating across movies, because I mean it's Lamberto Bava who did the Demons movies, but Argento produced it, and then Stage Fright, which was directed by Michele Soave, who's also like a second unit director for this and Tenebrae, and he plays the cop who's stabbed in
Daniele Soave.
Yeah. And also, because he did Stage Fright, the main actress, because we covered this movie, Alicia, she's in this movie too. Like I don't know if she has any lines, but you briefly see her. She's one of the people that works there, but she's in that scene where they're all in the Raven studio space when they're going over, I guess it's the wardrobe spot where they keep the birds too. But yeah, they're all in there, and I recognized her from Stage Fright. So yeah, all these people, they just like, because this was the same year, they just all did the same movies.
So much fun.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, feels like camp.
It's summer camp for sure.
Yeah, that kind of camp.
Yeah.
That kind of camp.
Before we move on, anything else?
Take a shot every time someone says Betty in this movie, and you will get wasted. Betty.
Is it more than Carol Ann?
I don't know. I would watch it again just to tally them up. Probably not, because with Carol Ann, you've got full on Carol Ann!
Yeah.
Carol Ann! Carol Ann! Just
need
Laura Flynn Boyle going over and over again.
I mean, it wouldn't be possible now because she's passed away. But could you just imagine like an American remake, but starring or co-starring Zelda Rubinstein as Mira?
Oh my God! Don't tell me things I can't have.
My advice is to, like, in her little voice, like, call the police.
Now hold on to yourselves. Let's go get that killer.
This opera house is clean. All right.
Perfect.
Let's get to the cherry picker.
It's not like we killed people. On purpose.
Okay, cherry on top. I know who I think it should be, but let's just... Should we say it on three?
We just said it.
Sorry. No, I was gonna say
Who did you think?
Julia, the wardrobe mistress.
Oh, I'd love to pick it, Julia.
Yeah,
okay,
because
sure,
because it's like every time. I mean, I also feel like she is kind of deserving to die, but like I have too much fun with the character too, and since she's the one that I always think of when I would just like visually think of the opera, and it's just like, oh, that wardrobe mistress and her like extremely emphatic performance. Yeah. Like, picking up the iron,
Yes.
all that. Like, it's
Okay,
gotta
let's
be
give it to
her.
Julia. I love
Yeah.
her. I love her. She made an impression on me, 100%.
Awesome. Yeah. But props to Daria Nicolodi as well.
Always, always, now and forever.
So last time we asked you who deserves to die the most in Better Watch Out. I nominated Garrett. You nominated Luke Lerner, and no surprise here, across Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube, the vote ended up being 72 for Garrett and 556 for Luke Lerner.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I know, right? Crazy. Who else was it gonna be though? Like, it's just like the pickings were slim.
I'm surprised 72 picked Garrett. Like, I'd like to hear. Let's hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just a few comments on the YouTube, but Thomas Baker says, I'm going with Eddie on this one. I'm picking Luke because he did all of that stuff just so he can have his babysitter all to himself. Also, we need a Better Watch Out too, because I want to see where the two characters end up right now. Jazzy Boo, I picked Luke because I don't like that smug look on his face. Also, he was just an asshole.
Yeah.
Amethyst Frost, I found this movie insufferable, and both of these baby incels needed to go the way of Buddy Cupford Jr. Voting for Luke because he survives the movie, but Garrett was honestly just as irritating for me, so I'm hard-pressed to think of a cherry picker where I've agreed with the two nominees more. I would have much rather watched Virginia and Patrick getting drunk and squabbling with each other at the Christmas party.
I mean, amen. Let's get that movie too.
Actually, there's quite a few comments. Sorry.
Okay.
Everything weather. Bro, this ain't even a question. This is the nature of the beast, though. Welshman. I can't remember if Garrett was in on it or not, but I'm gonna go with him either way. If he did know, he didn't call the cops or warn the girl. If he didn't know, he was just a little sissy not being able to take down Luke with the help of the babysitter. I am not saying Luke didn't deserve to die. I'm simply saying for this poll, I'm going Garrett. Plus, I kind of understand Luke's crush. He just went a tad overboard in finally making his move, LOL.
Oh my, okay. Thanks for the LOL. Go on.
Aunt DePuzzo, I hate Luke with a burning passion. I need a sequel so I can watch Ashley take him out. I adore this movie.
Yes.
Samantha Stewart, Luke for sure. Garrett was just a dumb kid going along with what he thought was a prank to impress his friend. Luke was literally a psychopath. Dylan Jameson, Luke hands down, slow and painfully. He is a creep and acts the nice guy until he doesn't get his way. And I effing hate males like that with a burning passion.
Same.
Yeah, and that's something you guys have in common.
Yeah, you don't hate guys like
You
that.
you just hate men. It's just men in general. Men.
Any excuse to kill him. Let's get him out. In celluloid. Not on purpose. Not really.
Sean Prinsick. Garrett, he was just aiding Luke's crazy antics. Luke needs to get the chop for sure, but Garrett isn't innocent either. L-Bar, where's the all of them button? Hate this movie.
Oh, wow.
Jarrett
Okay.
Korykowski. Guys, you got to review Behind the Mask Leslie Vernon.
Ooh.
We gotta, dude. Elliot from Orlando. When Luke just casually says, yes, I will, so smugly after being told he'd never get away with this, he has earned his place on the cherry picker and he must sashay away. XIITT, I hated Luke so much, it made me hate this movie. In the cherry picker he goes. A lot of hate for this movie. Keynote, this is one of my favorite Christmas movies. My family hates when I watch it every year. So some love, but a hateful family.
Right.
Oscar Wicks, I choose Garrett. He is just a moron. Luke is evil, but at least I can somewhat appreciate his passion and determination.
Oh dear.
Silent Saturn. Luke is the heavy of the film. It's his job to be a POS, and he does it perfectly. I have too much fun with him to axe him. Garrett was way in over his head, playing a game he didn't even know was going on. He gets the chop. Blue Box. Luke. He needs to be sent to Arkham Asylum. That screwed prude. Garrett only deserves it if we're considering his rapping in The Visit, which I've not seen.
Cute.
Monty Hux need a sequel. We need a sequel. I've been saying that since this one came out.
Better not cry.
Oi 5MT. I have not seen this, but Luke looks insufferable and smug. And Jaboni, never have I ever felt more strongly about voting one way. Kill Luke with the fury of 1 million paint cans. Garrett does have to face some punishment, but he is clearly just a child becoming more conflicted about the whole thing, demonstrating he has guilt and remorse for what's going on. I watched this movie to prepare for the pod and enjoyed it overall, but couldn't help but leave with that bleak feeling you guys talked about. Luke's parents come off aloof and just over the whole job of parenting, and I think the movie makes a good case for parents to stay more involved in their children's lives and focus a little less on dumping them off with a babysitter so you can feed that need to party before you had kids. All right.
Let's fault the existence of babysitters. Go.
What say you, first pick guy over here?
Well, I'm not going to surprise anybody. I'm going to go with a very similar choice as I did for the last episode. I'm going to pick the killer, the main killer.
How dare you?
Well, because this is the thing. Like, I do understand that Alan is probably a little less than Luke is in Better Watch Out. Alan is probably a little bit more a product of... I can't even call it his upbringing. We don't know how old the lad is, but when he was obviously traumatized, like, and brainwashed a little bit into like his kind of Manson family, murders that he was committing at the behest of Betty's mother. But the thing is, once Betty's mother is out of the picture, he doesn't seek out therapy. He doesn't even have a clear motive as to like the end game for him. Like he's a very, very sloppy man, so I can't even respect the direction he takes with his life as a killer, because it's like, well, what was the point of all of that? I'm flummoxed at the way he just kind of fails around into his murders. And even at the end when he finally finds Betty, and she fools him really easily by going like, no, I'm into it. It's like, he's like, oh, okay. That I mean, he's not smart enough to realize, oh, she could be lying to me at this particular moment, because he's, I guess, so all of a sudden so desperately just needs that familial murdery pact or something. Like he just was looking for a teammate. Or is he going to turn on her? I just don't have a specific sense of this man, and it limits my ability to have sympathy for him. So kill him, and then the movie's over. There you go.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to take the opposite approach, and I'm going to sympathize with the abuser, because Betty gotta go. This bitch is frustrating as hell throughout this movie. She allows herself, and that's she allows herself to be this victim here countless times. She is witness to several murders. She signed every single one of those people's death warrants and let it happen. And then the best she could do is like call the police and just be like, yeah, there was a murder. No, I'm not going to tell you who I am. And I'm just going to go about my business. And this whole spectacle at the opera house, like the pandemonium, like all those people who like were killed in the ensuing chaos of just like this plan. Yes, that was Mark that planned it with him, but like he's boring to me. He's just a very ineffectual character. So I feel like Betty is like the one who's just doing the most harm here. And the thing is, it's like if she had just given into the temptation of whatever it was, they probably could have spared all these people's lives. They've been like, okay,
oh my god,
all right, So yeah, I'm gonna pick Betty here, and maybe this is gonna be an unpopular vote, but I gotta go with my heart.
And your conscience?
I gotta go with my conscience. And I mean, out of the two of them, like I would much rather sleep with the killer. So
That's okay.
What?
You can have him.
what conscience? Yeah. All right.
You can have him. I'll take Stefano, however you say his damn name. I don't think anybody says his name in the movie. They just call him the stage manager.
He's just there. Yeah, it's William McNamara or McNamara. I would say McNamara.
I'll take Will I Am
McNamara.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, those are your choices. You can either vote for the killer or the sweet little innocent victim in all of this. But the poll is open on YouTube, Instagram, and my Patreon as well. So even if you're not supporting on Patreon, head over there for a free extra vote. If you're new to the Cherry Picker and you're over here on YouTube, please subscribe. But you can also listen to the podcast. The RSS feed link is in the descriptions down below. And you can find the Instagram account at the Cherry Picker Pod on Instagram, where you'll also be able to vote there. Edward, where can the fine people find you on social media?
Fine people, look for me. Let's just hit the ones that I'm on regularly. Instagram. That's the only one I'm on regularly these days. Okay, look for me there, and links elsewhere in the body of the thing. How about you, Zach?
and just because you forgot to say that, Edward is True.
Oh, Edward is True
is the handle. And,
one word, traditional spelling.
Yeah, there you go. And then you can find my main YouTube channel, Zack Cherry, ZACK space CHERRY, and Instagram at Retro Bitchface. That's all one word. Twitter, ZackCherry8, Letterboxd, Zack Cherry. Check it out. What do we got going on next week?
Next week we've got the space, hand, space, that space, rocks, space, the space, cradle, period.
Space.
Well, it's a title. There's no period. Space. Space. Why not? Extra space.
The hand that rocks the cradle. Yes, very good. So we'll be back next week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I already said it, but we'll be right back.